record on this computer. There we go. All yours.
Hi everybody at Super Relaxed Fantasy Club. My name is Faith. I am here today with the wonderful David and Russell, who are going to share some of their books with us, and then we're going to have a bookie chat. It should all be fun and games. We've all got a glass of wine, so you should be in for a real treat.
It's not wine. I could do a cheap plug, but they're not paying me, so
definitely wine.
Never do anything if you're not being paid for it. That's the motto, right?
Let's just, tasty whiskey and leave it at that.
Going to be wondering, that'll be all the comments on the video, is what whiskey is Russell drinking. Okay, anyway, my name's Faith. I'm F.D.Lee. I'm going to do a quick little wave of my books if you want to learn more about me. But I'm not the star of the show today, which is a bitter pill for me to swallow. But here we go. I swallow this pill. David, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Hello, I'm David Lascelles. I write as D.A. Lascelles, and I've done a few things. For example, this short story collection called Local Miscellany, which is currently on special offer on Amazon. Go and check it out. I also contributed to another anthology last year, which is this one here, Over the Top Alphas, Out This World Alphas, which is unfortunately out of print at the minute, but that will be coming back soon. My story from that will be coming back soon, so look out for that. I've also got a few other things out there as well, which you can look out for. I attend a lot of conferences. I do a lot of talks about. Most recently did mental health and superheroes. We did things like that. Quite enjoy the con circuit. It's good to be here, and over to you.
Hey, Russ, would you like to tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, I'd like to. I'm just, well, where do we start? Who we are and where we're from. Great start. My name's Russell. I'm currently writing under Russell A. Smith, but back in the day, and I don't know when the day was, I was writing under R.A. Smith because, you know, initials were cool. We were doing primarily at the moment everything you can get hold of has been either a sci-fi short story called from an anthology called CrimeNet, and I have no idea if we can get hold of that anymore, but I had a lot of fun with that. And then the same year that came out Oblivion Storm, which is the first part of the Grenshaw Manor Chronicles, which is yes, urban fantasy would be the best description. What have you got there? Well, we'll talk about that later. That's the first part of the Grenshaw Manor Chronicles, which I have intended as a trilogy. There will be a book 3. There is a book. There is a book 2, which you can see on the right there. That's Primal Storm. Yeah, and each of these takes a different lead character. Currently working on a more fantasy based on the using the existing Arthurian universe, which is something to do with Saracens and Camelot, and having a great time trying to battle my way through NaNoWriMo with that one. And I'm also spending an increasing amount of time in my dabbles as a historian, which means that at some point there will be historical novels, but you know, one thing at a time. Let me get the course first. Anyway, waffled enough.
That's wonderful. Thank you both very much for introducing yourself. I really want to kind of just dig in now to my kind of Cilla Black ITV hosting, you know, kind of vibe that I've got going on, especially because you look a little bit like you're on Blind Date with the pack with the boxes, you know? Is it just me? I feel like, guys in the audience, you know, comment in the comments about how this is very Blind Datey. All right, David, would you like to kick us off with a little reading from your book? Which book are you going to be reading from, first of all?
So I'm going to be reading from the current release, which is due out in end of November. So this is a piece called Transgressions. It's a sequel to 2 of my other works, which are currently out there still. And it involves a student called Helen, who is, at the time of writing, a PhD student. She started off as a bachelor student, and she's an archaeologist historian. And what tends to happen is weird stuff tends to happen to her, and she deals with it very, I think, competently and hopefully intelligently most of the time. So the piece I'm going to start with is from quite early on in the novella, where she has recently been given a prophecy by another character about the Green Man, how the Green Man was coming, and that there was something ominous about it. And so she's had some thinking about the Green Man. What is it? What does it mean? Why is it going to be ominous? And then she gets a message from a professor to go to the archaeological site because something's important has happened.
So this is the moment really where she's just about to get embroiled in lots of adventures and misadventures.
Yes. So we're going to start off. So she's met the professor. We've met the professor, and we've also met the other character who's important here, which is the volunteer called Simon. And there's more. He's quite an important character. Obviously, he doesn't at the minute. He's not very obviously important, but he is quite important. And they've been sent out to start going through the pieces that they discovered in this mine in Alderley Edge. And this is where she first encounters the Green Man, basically. So I'm just going to start reading now. So the piece that most caught her eye was Broken Rock. It was an odd green colour and had a leaf inscribed on it. There are other pieces that she suspected to fit the same hole. She started to gather these together and noticed that one of them had the sculpture of an eye surrounded by leaves upon it, the Green Man. Was this what Ash had been trying to warn her about? This ancient sculpture? But could there possibly be any threat from this? You spotted that one too, eh? Simon smiled at her. As he moved closer, she caught a stronger whiff of that scent. Her breath caught in her throat as she blushed. Was he the source of the scent? It wasn't an aftershave she recognised. I guess it does stand out against the less vibrant colours, she smiled back, and is very unusual for a Roman piece. I would not be surprised to find it was a later addition to this site. He nodded. Prof thinks it wasn't found where it was supposed to be either, though he does believe it was made during the Roman occupation. Oh? Why would you think that? She pondered this while she worked to put the pieces together, taking her time and enjoying the pleasant environment. When the puzzle was complete, her suspicions were confirmed. It was a depiction of the Foliate Man, and she could see the classical influences in the design. But it didn't quite fit with the other pieces of the time. For some reason, someone made this and put it on display inside a dark mine where no one would see it. She realised Simon was talking. Oh, sorry, what was that again? He grinned. Well, I was just saying, maybe we could call it a day. It is getting late and it'll soon be too dark to continue. She looked up and realised the light was closing in. She often got lost in her work like this. Let me help you pack up these away and we can put them in the storage locker till later. He held with a bunch of keys. She nodded. After all, leaving them here would mean not having to haul them all the way back to the office on the train. So I spent some time packing up the artifacts and load them into the storage locker that was near the entrance to the mines. However, when it came to the piece of the Green Man, Helen hesitated. You know, I think I want to work on this a bit more in the office tomorrow. I'll take it with me. Simon shrugged. Okay, you're the one carrying it, I guess. Listen, give me a few minutes and I can get the tram with you. She smiled. Yes, some company on the way home would be good, especially as it would offset this growing unease about Ash's prediction about the Green Man. Yeah.
Very spooky. Oh, I'm excited now. Okay, I'm going to have to hold my questions back for just a moment longer. We'll strike while the iron's hot. Russ, would you like to tell us a little bit about your story and introduce us to your characters and then do your reading?
Right. So hilariously, the reason we are the reason we are here is because I was asking very nicely if we could plug the anthology that myself and David have both been in. This is the first bit of writing we've actually first thing we've actually had in a release together, although we've worked previously together in the past, and we are constant enablers to each other at conventions and such like. Not to mention you first choice roommates as well. So yeah, This one, so yeah, mine is from that anthology. This one is called The Social Contract because, part of this, it's not McGrenshaw Manor Chronicles urban fantasy universe, but it's an urban fantasy universe that I was having some fun with. I'd actually started playing around with some. I'd actually started playing around with something on a previous short story, which oddly I haven't finished, because then I got the then I got the message from David and Co to say, got a space on this info. Would you be able to do anything? I was like, yeah, sure. I don't have anything. What do I do? So there was this frantic month or so while I just essentially dropped everything to try and get this thing done. So tell you a bit more about the elementals itself, and give you a bit of a link. We've been asked to write something. The key things were we needed a witch, and said witch needed to have a link with well, some sort of elemental affinity. And as I got there, and as I kind of got there, running through, figuring this out, I came up with Velma, who is my lead, and a rare release in first person for me. So that was a slightly different exploration, and she does air and water primarily, but quite enjoys herself doing that. And it's going to be a bit of a spot the pop culture reference for this, because that's kind of how I was rolling. It's certainly how Velma rolls. So yeah, that's about it really. I'll take a quick sip, and then I will blast through a bit of the first chapter for you.
Fabulous. This sounds very exciting. I'm keen on Velma and her pop culture. That seems to tick a lot of boxes for me.
I think we even might get far enough to, explain the name, but we'll see. Way back when, before I was born, Stevie Wonder made an album called Hotter Than July. We hadn't got out of June yet, and at 8:30 in the evening, we were still dealing with 26 degrees Celsius out in East London. So if that was ever a prophecy, it would all be puddles of sweaty goop by next month. I love the heat though, and I was looking forward to a long weekend break while I tried to work out what I was going to do with my summer while uni was out. My uncle lent me, his favourite niece, his 1980s Mercedes 350 SL with Master Blaster blaring out from that same Stevie Wonder album and the top down. Perfect for letting a cool breeze flow, even if the breeze blew a little bit harder around me than I'd have expected for a chilled out cruise like this. I was too busy looking forward to linking up with my cousin Roman again to care. We hadn't done it in way too long, and it wasn't just because he'd called me up and said he had a surprise for me. Yeah, okay, I was gassing about that, won't lie. We're going to play some Xbox for a bit. I brought Susie, my bass guitar, so we'd be jamming until the break of dawn with that too. Maybe spit some bars and mess with his turntables. I needed those mad times partying with his late great auntie again in my life too. Nobody alive I knew partied quite half as hard as her. Never a good sign to reach our meeting point, just outside the Island Gardens DLR station, to see cordon tape and flashing blues and twos next to his bimmer. Oh, hell, was this going to be another driving while black stop and search night? His car boot was open and he was nowhere to be seen. I pulled over across the road by some shops and ran over to take a closer look. I got myself ready for some serious cussing, but then I smelled the blood. So now I had different questions. Now, nothing kills a party vibe quicker than turning up to the chance of Cuz being dead. I marched right up to Roman's car to find out what was going on here, and fast. Yet I couldn't miss the dirty great black cloud swirling like a cyclone in the park behind the feds while they were busy poking around all this. It didn't move like a normal cloud either. Too fast, too much smoke. I figured the only reason they hadn't seen it was because they couldn't see it, and that bugged me more. Must have been what the angry wind in the car was trying to tell me. Unnatural bad weather I'd have sensed sooner. It's what I'd studied and trained with after all. I guess this was something more like spirit business, but the one person who might have known, Roman, wasn't here. So it's time for me to find out why. I watched two white officers carefully bagging something up from the boot. The male was tall, blonde, maybe in his 50s and looking bulky in his stab vest. 30s, sorry. He wouldn't have stood out much in a lineup of uniforms other than his size. His female colleague looked a few years younger, about a foot shorter, and only bearing any bulk because of a stab vest. She glared at me with frosty blue eyes as if I pulled a weapon out on them or something. I could tell this was going to be awkward before it even started. "Where's my cousin?" I asked, straight to the point. "Who?" she asked. When I said something was in the air, I meant it. I know these things. It's not unusual to pick up the occasional whiff of dead animals, but especially when you're right by a park and there's the usual urban wildlife like foxes or cats just doing their thing. But this smelt like something about the size of an elephant deliberately wearing a coat made up of a dozen dead furs just to say, "Don't mess." It nearly worked on me, except I thought about it a little harder. Surely the nearby feds would have noticed something giving out a stronger smell as well. Wasn't like they hadn't been around here looking for trouble, was it? "Oh yeah," she asked me a question, but I asked her one first. "My cousin?" I was meant to be meeting him here, and trust me, he's never late. "What's that got to do with us?" the big lad asked. He had a look on his face, you know, the opposite one to, "How can I help today?" and more like, "How can I be the most obnoxious dickhead today?" I've seen it a few times before, but again, not useful here. "Well," I said, "his car's right there. In your hands are his car keys. He's not in his car, he's not in yours. So where is he?" "I don't like your tone," he said. "Don't care for yours much either," I said, moving closer to them, hands up and nowhere near my bag. "Not important right now, though. Cousin." They had a little huddle, obviously deciding whether or not to tell me anything, which is about the point I noticed the evidence bag she had in her hands. In it, a large knife with markings on the hilt. I couldn't see through the plastic, and the kind of bling which only turns up on two kinds of weapons, British Museum thefts and ceremonial blades. Though, why not both sometimes applied? Certainly wasn't Roman's athame. I would have recognised that a mile off, and never leaves the house for exactly this reason. Get stopped once, they jump straight to knife crime and you're in the back of the van before you can say ritual tools. He was the one who'd always be banging on about this to the rest of us. This is exactly why we needed to be extra careful about transporting our foci and minding the majority population laws. So what the fuck was this doing in Roman's motor? He knew it was too easy for mundane law to draw the wrong conclusions, and that was the point I first noticed the blood. On the blade and the back of the car. I'm going to stop there. That looks like a good place to stop.
I need to unmute myself. That would be a good start. That was very exciting. Thank you very much. I have to say, listening to both your stories, you've both managed to pick up on one of the things that I really love about urban fantasy, which is that kind of sinister, kind of tense, kind of suspenseful creeping of the other world into seemingly normal situations. You know, like you'll go, well, I mean, obviously going on an archaeology dig is something we all do every weekend. Am I right, guys? Yeah, obviously.
We try to, but, you know, not allowed out of the house at the moment. So.
Oh, as long as you're going by yourself, I'd have thought you were all right. I don't know what the social distancing conventions of archaeology are. We should get Tony Robinson on. But you know what I mean? It's just, I really love that about urban fantasy, the way that you do, even if you're a fan of the genre like I am, it never stops getting exciting, this kind of thrill of the unknown creeping into the regular everyday world. I just wondered actually if you could talk a little bit about why both of you are quite keen on urban fantasy. I know you write lots of different genres, but particularly as we're here today, what is it about urban fantasy that drew you to it?
I think in my case, I find the sort of the juxtaposition of the normal and the weird quite interesting. So fantasy in a D&D fantasy setting, it's normal, it's every day, people talk about it everyday lives. But you put it into the modern day, suddenly it becomes weird, unusual, it becomes different. And also I think you can do a lot of stuff with history, with myth, with legends. I mean, you sort of things like the X-Files, for example, did that very well as well. The idea you take these urban legends and you twist them, you turn them into something that actually happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And
And you explain them.
history, haven't you? I mean, before the thing that my mind goes to before the X-Files is the Twilight Zone, but I'm sure there's something between kind of 1950 and 1990. I just have no idea what that is, but one would assume, right? But yeah, there is, you're right, the X-Files and those kind of television shows do it very well. But yeah, I like your answer and the idea of kind of pulling in history as well. What about you, Russ? What about you?
Yeah, well, the history is one of the great things, because I know you jumped straight from the 50s to the 90s, but well, or even the noughties or the whatever's. But yeah, I was sitting there even then, and my brain was drifting to some sort of 80s adventure. But it was just it's not the time for it now. But yeah, in terms of what draws me, I think. I think this might sound a bit of a contradictory answer, but when I start looking at things in the real world, and enjoying them and wondering and hearing some strange stories about things which may have come from the hand of an author half the time, I just get fascinated with that, and it's like, okay, we can. This often provides a bit of a hook for something going on, and yeah, as odd as this sounds, the more I've ground a hook in something from reality, the more out there I want to take it sometimes. So,
well, I think as sci-fi fantasy authors, 2020 certainly thrown us all a bit of a curveball, hasn't it? Because the sort of thing that one might write about as a kind of neo-noir or some such, I mean, it's happening around us. So it kind of pushes you, I think, to kind of go to the next step and the next stage and just hope it doesn't get pathetic.
I've been thinking recently about this actually, because it occurs to me that every single dystopia that's written, that's out there, is a real world thing that we've avoided, and just no one predicted this. No one's written about it until now, probably. So we're sort of living through what sci-fi authors forgot to write about.
The number of times I've seen on various social media feeds novelists who have just sort of, right, I had this idea, I had this wonderful idea, and then 2020 has just come along and it's just in the can, it's just in the bin now, because I thought this was nice and wild, but it turns out this isn't even realistic enough to start with here.
It's a shame, though. I think it's a shame if we're sort of drifting off topic. But while I'm pouring my wine, folks at home, I think that's a shame, though, if people are put off writing because 2020 and just reality is so weird. I mean, it's not the it's never the events. I think it's the people that populate the events that make them so interesting. I mean, how many space operas have we read? But each one has its own uniqueness that we adore and we love.
Oh yeah. No, I didn't say anything about being put off writing. It was just that particular story may have gone. But yeah, this is this was one of the little briefs I had for doing for doing this. In fact, it was sort of, right, okay, look. This has been a really weird year and quite miserable in a lot of places. So whatever happens here, no matter how serious the adventure or how grim anything gets at a point, the main through line I'm going to have is this character has to have fun at some point. That's it. That's my one rule.
I think that that really came across, though, in the excerpt that you read. I'm not sure if we're on panel view or speaker view, but if you couldn't see me while Russ was reading, I was giggling away at quite a lot of it. Like the juxtaposition between my friend's dead and there's blood and there's police and I've got a magical knife and this could all go very wrong, to just how, they are coping with this situation. I thought it worked really well, I have to say. And I know I'm lucky enough to have read the first book in Dave's trilogy. And again, it has that nice kind of juxtaposition between, oh gosh, something's going to go wrong, but Helen is just handling it so well and you're cheering her on. I guess as well, so to talk about both of you together, this is an anthology that you are both part of. So is the anthology as a whole, is it urban fantasy or is it a more of a mixture? Can you tell me a little bit about the anthology?
Well, the anthology is called The Elementals. I believe we have a cover. If you can have the technical support, bring it up.
Thank you.
It's all
Thank you,
more
Abby.
here, guys.
So it's called The Elementals, and it's, as Russ said earlier on, it's about basically anything to do with witches, elementalists, controlling the elements, that sort of thing. It was a very vague brief we were given. I believe I believe the stories I've heard about from it have all been urban fantasy-ish, a lot of them from romance element. So that's as far as I understand it. I've only read my own and Russ's, so I don't know what anyone else is doing, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, I mean, we have a common through line of vampires as well, but
Oh no, hang on, don't shush that. I'm all about the vampire life.
no, I'm going to divert from there because yeah, I was listening from this from the chats we've had in various we've had in various briefings with all of the other authors. There's some people super, some of them are super keen on the romance element, and I'm just and I was sort of, yeah, I'm not really feeling that right now, but I might I might mess with something. Well, we'll see. And yeah, it just turned out while it did. Again, the brief as far as my head was concerned was have fun, do the adventure, and follow the theme as much as I can. So
I'd like to ask a little bit about the theme, because you both mentioned this element of elementals, which is a kind of strangely balanced sentence. Now I will claim no knowledge of anything scientific or elemental. For me, it all came from Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I know about earth, air, fire, and water, and that's about me. Could you tell me, I mean, a little bit about either the elements that you were drawn to or why you were drawn to them, or did you go kind of wider within that remit on elements? How did you interpret that?
Well, I've actually used a character. I obviously used Helen from a previous story, but I also used Simon, is also from a previous story. So in Lurking Miscellany, which is here, there is a story about somebody who controls the elements, and I basically transplanted him into this story. Now, he controls all the elements, and he does it by talking to them. So he has these voices in his head. He has earth, air, fire, and water, and they speak to him, and he speaks to them. And as he explains at one point in the book, sometimes they do favors for him. So it's almost like he asks them nicely, and they will do something for him. So, and in this, he does quite a few things. He makes a storm happen. He creates a pheromone, which is,
I suppose because of the air element, right?
Yeah, which is hinted at in the extra I read out. But he can also do things like create fire. You can move water, things like that. You can do quite a few things. And I've given each of the elements has a personality that he relates to. So he talks to the personality, and and sometimes they don't do what he says. They're a bit like pets. So sometimes he has to persuade them.
I'm imagining cats now, because you've mentioned that you have this element of persuasion and negotiation, right? So I'm just now imagining fire cats and water cats, and I'm very happy.
I think air is more like an excited puppy, but yeah.
Labrador.
Pretty much, yeah. Very yippy, but more yippy than a Labrador. But
Well,
It's trying to be nice, but you'd already thought of wine, hadn't you?
yes.
You need to top up here, didn't I?
you get wine delivered.
have a top up. Come on.
What is going on here?
And how long are you going to be?
Soon.
Okay, I'll order food then.
Oh my gosh, you've got a water or wine,
Your portal works.
I say?
Yeah.
A wine elemental, and what would food be as an element? Earth, maybe? Food?
It depends on the food, I imagine.
I think it all starts from the earth, though, doesn't it? In one way or another.
Because as a scientist, I'm all for the 96, the 400 and whatever elements they are. But yeah.
Well, yeah, this is it. I mean,
Okay,
we
so
had
let's back to my question, Russ, please.
Yeah, I mean, we had a few we were asked to choose from specifically in this, and my usual if I had been following the route I'd taken with the stuff for the Grenshaw Manor Chronicles, I'd have probably leaned quite heavily on the spirit side of things. Which is kind of why I deliberately from the reading you'll have heard enough to know the small challenge I both set myself and for Velma here, in that we have someone in the middle of something that someone like her cousin who's like really adept with spirit magic of various sorts, isn't available to deal with a thing that looks like it would be right up his street. So she's got to do it. And she's not so good on that side of things. So the first thing she has to try and tell herself is to play to her own strengths. Probably dropped a couple of hints that she's got a pretty strong affinity with air.
Okay, because it's funny.
But at the same time, is her real passion is that she considers herself a pretty badass mermaid. So this all comes up, but this all comes up. But yeah, let's say part of it's fun. And a second theme I had sort of for myself is very much a clue in the title of the social contract, whereby there's a lot of authorities and laws and things that are going in conflict with one another, and she ends up throwing herself on this adventure mostly out of a sense of duty. I mean, sure, she wants to see her. She wants to sort getting her cousin out. But if her cousin isn't around, someone's got to deal with this thing. And this isn't the Peter Grant universe. So there are not magically trained police officers out there. And in fact, they try and keep that bit as separate as they can. But this is one of those bits. This is one of those times where there's a rather large conflict of interest. So she's trying to explain that without getting arrested, which is what, and whilst also trying to keep those two in one piece because they can't handle what's going on there. So this is how this all starts, and yeah. I mean, laws are very different.
It sounds wonderful, though. I have to say, I mean, you've sold me on the anthology. I hope everyone else is as keen to read it as I am, because I'm well up for a bit of elementals, I have to say. Is it out now? Is it available? Can I go to Amazon this very moment and purchase, or any other online dealer, because social distancing, online dealer, not just,
I think there's a partial disclaimer we're going to have to throw here, depending on what, depending on time this actually gets released onto the Super Relaxed Fantasy Club. But we are told this month, so
release date is the 28th of November.
There we go.
And it is on pre-order, but on Kindle only at the minute.
Kindle only at the moment, but yeah, we've there will be books.
Environment, better. Well, I think it's less paper, right? Although you don't get to have messy bookshelves, which is always attractive. But yeah, I'm glad that we can pre-order it. I'm assuming that you will make a link available for all the Super Relaxed Fantasy people who are not going to be relaxed at all about getting their hands on a copy of this fantastic book, right?
They're always relaxed. They're super relaxed. That's how this works. But yeah, sure, we'll let everybody know it's cool.
I'm not sure how we're doing for time, but I do have one question that certainly I would like to ask you. That I kind of came up for me during your introductions, actually, which was this idea of historical writing as well. Russ, you said you're currently writing an Arthurian, or you're beginning this kind of Arthurian adventure. Dave, I know from your books, or at least the ones that I've been lucky enough to read, that they have a historical bent. Transitions, for example, has the Roman element, which I personally adored because I like Roman. I'm a Roman geek girl. And I guess I'm interested in knowing sort of, how does history inspire and influence what you're writing? I guess directly and indirectly. I will leave you to answer that amazingly well-crafted question first.
You want to go first, David?
Go on.
Speaking directly on what I'm trying to do with the Camelot project, which first I've got that thing where I'm very much envisioning a trilogy for various reasons, and the thing we've got with the thing we've got with Arthuriana is there's quite a bit of it out there, and existing information. But we've also got that we could also get into a large argument about what's canon and what's not, and it's just like, well, not really. I've got a very strong feeling about things with the King Arthur story, with the King Arthur stories, in that I feel that the ones that have been written so far have always been written with something in mind for the time that they are written in, as rather than the time they are written from. If that makes any if that makes any sense. So
you're more interested in the content than where that period that content came from.
Well, I like to know what the I like to know what a lot of the I like to know what the context is, but I also want to know what I also, you know, have to stop and think about what I want to do with it. Mm-hmm. So I've got a few things, without going heavily spoilerific, that I've decided to remix entirely. You're not gonna catch very many princesses stuck up in towers, because in most of the background reading I did, half of them didn't even have names. So we're not doing that. I'm going to be playing around a bit with how some of the with who some of the knights are. You may find some of the stories, you may find some cases a couple of stories are conflated. A story you may expect a character to be following, I'm going to possibly look at going on a bit of a swerve with that, just to make it that. And also, yeah, the main thing I've probably mentioned is that there's a family of Saracen knights who are my lead characters for this, and they are turning up. They are turning up in foreign lands for these purposes, but it's not like they're it's not like they're the first and only knights of colour there at all. Far from it. But but yeah, a few of the perceptions we may have are some of the things I'm quite actively wanting to explore with the story.
I think that sounds really. I really love that, because particularly, you know, with medieval romance, which of course Arthurian legends, you know, they are, and now people can correct me on this. I'm more than happy to be corrected, but my understanding is that the first big Arthurian tale was the medieval romance. Sorry, French speakers, Le Mort d'Arthur, which, as you
Mallory, yeah,
as you quite rightly picked out, you know, women, for example, people of color, for example, they don't really do very well in those kind of stories, those kind of narratives. So I think that's really fascinating to me. What you're saying is, you know, yes, I'm going into the historical, but don't expect me to kind of bow down to the historical expectations just because I'm writing a historical fiction. Or at least that's how I understand what you're saying.
Well, of a few friends of mine I have here who are frankly some of the leading experts on both medieval and Arthuriana that I know anywhere. I would love to have here to speak about this. Carrie Sperring, whose work is out there, and somebody I went to the Milford conference with, and we've had a chat about this, and I was sort of asked, and I'd had a few conversations of so do you reckon this is okay if I did this, and this is okay if I did this, and you know, and you will know this, Carrie, because nobody else because this is totally your thing. You know, this is what you studied forever and everything. So does what's Palamedes' mum called? And it was like, has she ever been named? No. So I went away and was like, okay, I'm going to give her a name. And we've got a whole character that I want to actually play with a bit here. So yeah. And it's just been little things like that has been going on. I was like, okay, we're going to do this.
I have to say, that sounds to me absolutely joyous. And I can see, you know, from the way you're speaking about it and the expression on your face, just how enthusiastic and excited you are about this project. I'm looking forward to reading this along with Elementals, guys, out in November sometime, pre-order Netflix. Dave, I'm going to put the spotlight, the zoom of doom onto you. What are your thoughts about writing historical or drawing on history in your work?
I'm terrible at historicity. I'm absolutely terrible at it. I now quite often notice the mistakes after I published. But Carrie Sperring's been a great help with a lot of the stuff. She contributed some stuff to this one. She told me how to spell druids properly in Roman. Oh, wow. So how the Romans would have spelled druids, which the editor picked up as a misspelling. I told her, no, that's right. That's how it's supposed to be spelled. But you mentioned the Roman stuff. Now, the reason I went with Roman for transitions originally, I started with my hometown, which is South Shields in the northeast of England. And there's a Roman fort there, has been since Hadrian's Wall was built. So I decided to make the character who was the historical character in Transitions. He was the commander of that fort, and it was one of the supply depots for Hadrian's Wall. And it was actually, I found out later, it was actually garrisoned mostly by Persians. Was a big thing, which I could have made use of if I thought of it at the time.
But he's a very tragic figure in your book, in Transitions.
He is, yes, yeah. So, and also I also sort of brought in as well Bath as well, because I've got a big thing about Bath. In fact, the thing I'm writing at the minute is using Sulis Minerva as a character from Bath.
Not for me, because I'm obviously super knowledgeable, but for our listeners at home, perhaps you could tell us who that is.
So during the Roman occupation, the Romans had a very corporate view of religion. So they would find a local god and they'd say, this local god of yours, very similar to our god, whatever. Maybe we should combine them together and make a much stronger god. So Sulis was a local water god in the Bath region, and the Romans merged it with Minerva, the goddess of wisdom, but also elements of water and so on as well. And I like that idea. So I used the Baths at Rome as one of the settings in Transitions as well. In Transgressions, which is my story in the Elementals, I've again gone Roman. In fact, Helen comments on maybe she should study a different period of history, because she seems to keep finding all these ancient curses in the Roman period. Maybe.
As you do, Helen. Don't worry, mate. It happens to us all on a Friday night. Honestly, the amount of times I've come home on the night bus with a Roman curse.
Oh, every night, yeah. So she considers maybe studying the Regency is a less problematic era. But that one I was looking at Manchester, because I moved home from Birmingham to Manchester, and she is doing her studies on a mine at F.D.Lee Edge, which is near Manchester, an old Roman mine, and that's another issue we can talk about in a bit.
Where footballers live.
But I'm also tying in with an idea I had many years ago about there being a sort of a vampire living under Manchester and controlling mines, and that's what I'm coming to with this one. But I decided F.D.Lee Edge as a location because there's a lot of myths and legends about that place. One of which includes a typical Arthurian legend, King under the Hill idea. So I sort of made my vampire that King under the Hill.
Now, as you know, you are speaking my language with vampires. Come on. I am but flesh and blood. My womanly bosom doth quiver for a vampire, as well. You guys, you're both just singing my songs tonight. I'm sure I'm not the only one that is fascinated by these stories. But I think as well, now this is a technical question, so this may be where the smooth running of this interview goes slightly wonky. But I think, David, didn't you have some locations or pictures that you wanted to share with us? Have I got that right?
Yes. So I was talking about the location. So I decided I knew there were some mines at F.D.Lee Edge, and I'd been there a few years ago, and had a look around. So I had a feel for the place. Trouble is, I was going to go back this summer when I was writing this story, and just to double check things, have another look and see everything was as I remembered it. And obviously lockdown happened, so I couldn't. So I wrote the story anyway, and I made some decisions about how the place looked. And if you look at the picture that's on the screen now, that is one of the mines at F.D.Lee Edge. It looks nothing like what I described. So just so you know. So accuracy is completely out the window on that one.
Oh, do you know? I remember reading an interview with the author of Jack Reacher, whose name it's thriller stuff. It's not my bag, but he was talking about getting letters from readers who live in New York and sort of saying, well, actually, if you turn left on such and such a street, you're not going to get to wherever. I think readers have to be a bit generous if something isn't exactly the same in your novel as it is in real life, especially with lockdown. Yeah, and I'm sure the readers of the Super Relaxed Fantasy Club will be super relaxed about that kind of thing.
Yes,
Do you have any
not so relaxed from Islington. Will send us is going to send us a stern letter of complaint after reading this and explaining that these locations were not.
Excuse me, I think you'll find
quite this timing. Yeah,
I think you'll find that's not accurate. Yeah, I was. This is slightly off topic, but my gosh, I was talking to a comic book artist who wrote Victoria. It was kind of on topic, but she was writing Victorian fantasy, and she had women and LGBTQ and people of color and stuff like that. And she got dragged so badly for apparently not being historically accurate, as if suddenly these people just weren't alive at that point in history. Joe, I mean, I'm sorry I'm going to be not relaxed at all at Islington, but this is not the place for you, Well, go back to Islington.
Oh, I don't know.
Didn't Mary Beard on Twitter once completely destroy somebody who tried to explain to her there were no black people in Roman Britain at one point?
I remember that. Yeah, I remember something like that happening.
Yeah. Totally
likewise, likewise, it won't surprise you to know that I have witnessed many such a fight when somebody explains when someone tries to explain something to me. Do you know, this is actually one of the reasons this is actually one of the reasons I have actually gone into getting myself a historian hat this year, so I can sit there and not pick fights, but be ready for them, you know.
Not pick the fight, but win the fight when the fight inevitably comes.
Yeah. We're not going to start
it.
this, but we're damn sure going to finish it.
Finish it. I think we can all have cheers to that, right?
Yes.
Chin chin. Slightly diverted there from your tour. Is there any other pictures that you have for us, Dave?
No, that's just
Is
all.
that it?
So,
Are we have we grilled you enough on your historical accuracy, which apparently is failing?
lack of.
Yeah, I got no pictures for you. What I will tell you is that, which is actually almost which is a similar story to David's. So the action certainly in the first scene area that I'd written on is could probably be seen from the balcony of a friend of mine. A couple of friends of mine who live around there. So obviously I was going to pop over and just do a proper walkthrough, turning left from Island Garden Station and doing all of that stuff. But yeah, 2020. So didn't get to do that. So what instead happened were a few emails on Twitter saying, so if I wanted to do this, where can I find a water source around here? And then I had a bunch of things explained to me. So it was enough to go on, even if, you know, not necessarily as the crow flies, but as the witch flies in this case.
Well,
we can work with this
point. As the witch flies, quite right. Yeah, another very valid point. I think, you know, working out the way that you guys have done in 2020, especially, you know, clearly with what you have, which is a real intention to be as accurate as possible. It sounds to me like you've really worked around the trials and tribulations, the adventures and misadventures that 2020 has given to us. Has there been, now this is an off-the-cuff question, has there been any you know, you're talking about your successes here in working around 2020. Have you had any like difficulties with 2020 in terms of your writing? I mean, has it gotten in the way of your research or anything like that, or is it all easy sailing?
I think, well, I've already mentioned the one big problem was not getting hold of the edge until last month when it was too late. But in general, actually, it's helped because I think I saved a lot of time not commuting, and I spent that time writing. So I think that made a big difference. But I think there's been there's been other problems as well. I mean, I've missed all the conventions this year. They've been online, but it's still not the same as being there. And I quite like being there rather than doing it remotely. So that's the main two.
And I think you said in your intros, you guys are convention. Are you support buddies or convention kind of influencers on each other? I feel like there's a convention.
I'm sorry, I'm just exploding with laughter at the thought of you know, myself and influencer being used in the same sentence in any possible way. I feel like I should be doing yes, I'll tell you about my 500,000 followers on YouTube, and you know, what I'm having for breakfast this morning because people care, you know.
I sense though that you have an influence over Dave, perhaps, and vice versa at the con.
He just can't get rid of me easily. That's all it is.
We do a lot of things together at conventions, yeah.
Why would you want to get rid of each other? Come on, you're lovely.
We're a tag team
together.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've lost my way a little bit. But my question, I suppose, and I guess we're kind of wrapping up now because we're knocking on the hour. We're at Super Relaxed Fantasy Club online, which is normally a really lovely thing run in London, and you know, you get to meet people, and you've both mentioned conferences or conventions, I suppose I should say, online and things like that. So let's end on a positive note. I'm going to fit. This might be the truest moment of fantasy in the whole interview, but let's end on a positive note. where would you like to see each other again in real life? Have you got a convention in mind or a meeting in mind, or just down the local pub? Where would you like to chin in real life the next time you see each other?
It's going to be hopefully the next EasterCon, if it happens. If not, maybe the one after
It'll
that.
happen in some capacity.
In some capacity, yes, but in person, yeah.
The EasterCon is your big hope.
Yes.
So guys, if you want to interview these two wonderful and talented and incredibly funny authors, much better than I'm sure I've done tonight, EasterCon at the moment is your chance. So make sure you go and find them if EasterCon is happening in real life. If it's not happening in real life, make sure you find them on the e-version. Otherwise, I guess it's probably time for us to wrap up. Dave, Russell, would you like to have any? This is the end of Blind Date, guys. Now, this is the moment where you've got to win him or her over, win them over. What's your final spiel?
Number 3, because I'm just picking an arbitrary number here if we're doing the blind date thing. Oh, no, sorry, somebody's possibly picking us. Right, okay. I should do I suppose I should do the customary where to find us on social media thing. Yeah, so if you do Facebook, I have got a Facebook page, which is the usual Facebook links with Mr. R.A. Smith. You can't miss me. I'm not. You can't miss me. I'm either in a flying jacket or I'm holding a raven. And if you want to know the rest of that, you can come and find me. Also, I natter on Twitter far too much. I'm at R.A. Smith PSL. That's Romeo Alpha Smith. PSL for Project Shadow London. So now you know.
Which is the whole thing.
Insta follow from me. You're going to get a barrage of follow-up questions on your fascinating sounding books from me. What about you, Dave? What's your blind date final hurrah? Where can we get you?
Well, I'm also on Facebook. On Facebook more than I probably should be. So you can find me on there. I'm D.A. Lascelles on Facebook's page. I'm also on Twitter. I don't do that very often. That's as Aretius, Areteus. But I do have a blog, which is dalascelles.co.uk, which you can find lots of random ramblings about various things. We do have on there the now infamous Vampire Month, which I've been running for several years. In March for random reasons that don't make any sense, rather than October. Recently, though, in October, we did run a series of interviews with people who've written the Slay anthology, which was quite an interesting one. So there's some quite good interviews on there at the minute. You can go and have a read of those for some great authors. But other than that, that's where you can find me.
Fabulous. Thank you both very much. And I guess if you're in the number of people that maybe wished you could have dated Cilla Black as opposed to the other people, I too am on all the socials. My name is F.D.Lee. You can find me on Facebook. I'm at F.D.Lee Author. You can find me on Twitter at Faith.D.Lee, or you can do it all from my website, www.fdlee.co.uk. And
can I just say, In the Slip is an amazing book.
Oh, this one?
Yes, that one.
So subtle. This one?
We don't do subtle around here.
No, we are relaxed.
Relaxed but unsubtle.
Do you know that's my tombstone? That's my tombstone right there. Here lies Faith. Relaxed but never subtle. That's the one. That's it. And then I'll vampire out of it. On that note, I'd like to say a big thank you to Dave Lascelles for joining us today and talking about his work, to Russell A. Smith for joining us today and talking about his work. And Russell, just remind me, what was your other pen name?
R.A. Smith.
R.A. Smith.
But yeah, future stuff, it will just be Russell A. Smith, because that matches my con badge and doesn't confuse me as much.
There we go. Thank you everybody for joining us. I hope you've had a nice time. Do feel free to get in touch with the authors. Obviously, Super Relaxed Fantasy Club is still going on and it will be back as soon as we're all allowed, like zombies, out of our crypts. Thank you very much, guys.